All righty. Welcome back, commissioners, and back to you, Chair Harrington.
Welcome, everyone, back to the Washington County Board of Commissioners work session for Tuesday, September 19th, 2023. We have two remaining items on our work session, and the first one is the North Plains Urban Growth Boundary Expansion. So welcome, staff and guests. Please take it away.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Harrington and members of the Board of Commissioners. My name is Erin Wardell. I am the Planning and Development Services Manager here at Washington County. And with me today are Andy Barner, City Manager of North Plains, and Bill Reed, Finance Director of North Plains. We will be going over a PowerPoint presentation with you and then available for questions. So our presentation outline, start with purpose and desired outcome. We will be outlining North Plains UGB expansion process, as well as explaining to you the county's involvement to date. We'll be talking about our county ordinance and then covering next steps. So our purpose today is to outline the urban growth boundary expansion process that North Plains has been going through over the last several years. We'll be updating the board on the process so far and the next steps. And our desired outcome is to receive any board feedback or guidance before we move forward in our hearings process. The questions we'll revisit at the end of this presentation are basically, do you have any questions for either county staff or for City of North Plains staff? So the county has been involved in North Plains urban growth boundary expansion process since 2019, when the city first approached us and let us know that they were going to be investigating an urban growth boundary expansion. Between 2019 and 2023, county staff participated in a technical advisory role on their project advisory committee. County staff have also had extensive communication with our Department of Land Conservation and Development contacts to make sure that we are following the correct process for this urban growth boundary expansion. This slide is a lot of the meat of what we'll be talking about from the county side today. And what this slide outlines is how this urban growth boundary expansion is different from an urban growth boundary expansion within Metro. As far as my time at the county, and I think recent UGB expansions, they have all been within the Metro urban growth boundary. The key difference between Metro urban growth boundary expansion and outside of Metro urban growth boundary expansions is the county's decision-making role. Within the Metro urban growth boundary, the county does not have a decision-making role. We essentially go along with what Metro has done and update our comprehensive plan maps to be consistent with Metro's decision. With an urban growth boundary expansion for one of our cities outside of Metro, the county does have a decision-making role in the process. And the plan will not move forward to the state for acknowledgement until both the city and the county have accepted the urban growth boundary expansion. There's one other difference, which is that within Metro, there are urban reserves identified. And so Metro jurisdictions consider expansion into urban reserves first. Once a certain percentage of those have been used, we can consider undesignated land for a Metro UGB expansion. North Plains doesn't have urban reserves, so they immediately started with undesignated rural lands for their expansion. So those are the key differences. Here's the timeline that we're following for this process. North Plains held their urban growth boundary expansion hearings on August 9th at their planning commission, which recommended approval. On September 5th, they had their first reading at City Council. And last night, they had their second reading, and the City Council voted unanimously to approve the UGB expansion. So didn't have time to update our PowerPoint, but that just happened. The county has scheduled our ordinance hearings for October 18th at the Planning Commission, and we expect to bring it to your board on November 28th. Following the county's adoption, if that is the direction of the county, it will be sent to the Department of Land Conservation and Development for acknowledgement. So with that, I'm going to hand the presentation over to staff from North Plains to talk through their process. You can advance the slides.
Very nice. Thank you. Bill Reed, Finance Director for the City of North Plains. Thank you for the opportunity to visit with you today about all of this. The City of North Plains, again, just last night upon second reading, adopted the new two ordinances approving and adopting the new housing needs analysis that drives the urban growth, partly drives the urban growth boundary expansion that we're talking about here, as well as approve the urban growth boundary expansion last night. So in total, the city is moving to expand the urban growth boundary to accommodate an additional 855.2 acres of land. That's really driven by the findings of two reports, an economic opportunities analysis that the city adopted back in the late fall of November, actually, of last year. And that report found the city needed about 655 acres of industrial land, employment land, including industrial land primarily. The housing needs analysis that was also done and just adopted finally last night calls for about an additional 150, 160 acres for additional housing need for the city, both of those for the standard 20-year period for urban growth boundary expansion planning. So moving forward, that's kind of the large number and the kind of two driving reports. The EOA was actually acknowledged by the state LCDC end of last year. So that's acknowledged, and moving forward, those are kind of our EOA or employment land need findings. The broader context for all of this, and this kind of goes back in time a little bit, but the land that we're looking at expanding into is technically not designated or is undesignated land under urban reserves law. HB 4078 in 2014, what we kind of commonly refer to as the grand bargain legislation, set up about 1,500 acres of land around the city of North Plains, all of it undesignated, meaning that it's not urban reserves, so it doesn't have an expedited process for expansion of urban growth boundary, but it doesn't have protections on it, rural protections on it for permanent long-term agricultural use protection. So it was set aside, all that land, for the city to consider future growth. And so that's really kind of the description for the land that's around the city. It is a little bit different than around the Portland Metro UGB. This map basically just kind of highlights North Plains and the undesignated lands around it and where the city was allowed to even take a look to expand its UGB. The land that is unshaded is kind of a gray or whitish color. Those are the undesignated lands under urban reserves law. Those lands were set aside for the city to be able to consider future expansion, but there wasn't a process at the time for the city and the county to work together on making those lands around North Plains urban reserves. So they were just simply left as undesignated for future possible growth. The urban growth boundary expansion we're discussing takes up a portion of those lands, but not all. There's quite a bit of acreage to the north of the city in the undesignated lands that the city is not considering during this urban growth boundary expansion. I think this. Okay. Oh, this is mine still. Okay, very good. This is just a little bit more detail about the lands that are undesignated around the city of North Plains and the process that we went through under statute that guides urban growth boundary expansion analysis, goal 14, basically urbanization in Oregon land use law. The undesignated lands around us in total were all considered study area for considering urban growth boundary expansion, largely because of the acreage that was identified in terms of need. So we had to look all through. The vast majority of the land is within a mile of the city's existing urban growth boundary and city limits. So it all qualified for study purposes. We have an east, broad east shaded yellow, a south of Highway 26 area that we took a look at, a west side, all shaded blue, and then to the north, the red shaded area. All of those kind of have different scoring criteria under goal 14 in terms of how to take a look at it for appropriative use, energy issues, social impacts, economic impacts, environmental impacts. So all of those things were considered standard with what's required of statute for a goal 14 analysis for urban growth boundary expansion for a city such as North Plains of its size and surrounded by undesignated lands.
Okay. Thanks, Bill. Andy Varner, City Manager. Again, thank you for giving us this opportunity to address you today in the work session. So after those two studies, the EOA and the H&A, the housing and the economic studies, and then doing all the scoring criteria that Bill had just kind of talked about that's there in the goal 14 UGB report, this is the ultimate adoption line that the City Council adopted last night on the recommendation of the Planning Commission. Yeah, there's no cats in here. This purple that I'm tracing here is the line that the City Council adopted as our future UGB area, the growth area. Again, to summarize, the green is all of the undesignated lands that were carved out in the grand bargain for North Plains. all of this area in green is what we studied in our analysis, and ultimately putting our two employment land and housing need land reports together. This is what results in that here shaded in the purple. So really kind of all sides and all cardinal directions. This is we had a project advisory committee that had 8 meetings over a couple of years, public meetings over a couple of years, and it's some very, very preliminary, comprehensive and concept planning. These are some areas that they identified as potential employment land or housing land. So employment lands would be in blue, housing lands would be in yellow. Some of the factors for that would be, there's a new school from the Hillsborough School District on the east side. We'd like to have more housing and sort of denser housing going there and connecting the city, where we only have one road, a county road, West Union, that connects the east part of town to the rest of town. And perhaps a future road extension with a bridge and redundant water system on this side going around McKay Creek, and then more housing north of town to connect into the larger subdivision we have under development. We did get a grant from DLCD and ODOT, a Transportation Growth Management grant, over $200,000 that we're going to use for our own comprehensive concept planning starting later this year to really hone in and identify where the employment lands are going to be and where the housing will be, along with other parks, trails, and other institutional or other sort of government uses. So I'm going to summarize here a couple of the questions, concerns that the city has heard, and you no doubt will hear if you've not already heard. But some of the questions from various folks have addressed, to what extent has the city planned for the impact on infrastructure, utilities that could have on the regional system? This project started way before 2019. It started with a visioning project in 2015. It was called City North Plains Vision 2035. So doing the economic and housing studies started 3 years before I even started my job in North Plains. So it goes back to 2015. In 2019, that's when the city, after I've been here about a year, really dug into the EOA and H&A reports. And through part of that process, as we had project advisory committee meetings, we've been in contact with utilities, including Portland General Electric, Clean Water Services, and our Joint Water Commission, even Tualatin Valley Water District for different utility needs and services. Part of another distinction that makes North Plains a little bit different and having our own urban growth boundary and being outside the metro is we don't have to go through the rigorous, comprehensive concept planning that metro cities often have to do before they go to a UGB expansion proposal. We adopt a line, and then we work with our partners, and this is according to state law. We do all of our concept and comprehensive planning after the line adoption. That's why the state supported us with a grant to do all that work right now. So we have been in contact with utilities, but we do a lot of that heavy lifting starting later this year. Another concern, as you may imagine, is the loss of farmland and high quality soils just because of the nature of the lands that surround North Plains. I think as Bill ran through earlier, those lands were given the undesignated status back during the Grand Bargain and all of the work that went on over that 3 or 4 year period more than a decade ago. North Plains, there's no way around it. We are surrounded by farmlands, but there's also no way that we could not impact farmland if the city is to grow and to meet its 20-year land need obligation for employment and housing needs. So we did the soil analysis and we did do the farmland analysis, but that's kind of where North Plains is. That's where the allowance is to grow outside of the city is into those farmland areas and agricultural areas. Some folks wanted us to address Senate Bill 4 semiconductor issues as part of the expansion. North Plains was identified by the Semiconductor Task Force as one area of opportunity, but in our economic opportunities analysis, it wasn't one of the semiconductors were not really addressed as part of our targeted industries as that process with the Joint Task Force and then the Joint Committee in the House and Senate. That process was going after we conducted our EOA. So as we do our concept planning, we'll no doubt we'll have to do planning for our targeted industries and looking at other like-minded clustered economic development industries of Washington County. So there will be some overlap in semiconductor planning, but we didn't explicitly do all of that planning in our economic opportunities analysis. And then lastly, there's some a letter written about the Tualatin Valley Irrigation District easements on the west side of the city. Our city attorney had a legal counsel opinion that was conducted on that, and addressing those easements are something that we can do through the urban growth boundary process. Do I take this one, Erin?
I think I'm ready, or you can.
Okay, yeah, why don't you?
Okay. Sure. So part of the next steps of work that we are going to be working on is determining as a county if the proposed urban growth boundary expansion complies with all the applicable land use planning goals, administrative rules, and city code requirements. The city code requirements is part of their process. Now we'll consider other requirements for that. North Plains has made the determination that it's supported by their adopted economic opportunities analysis, their housing needs analysis, and the staff report findings. So North Plains staff recommended the approval to their planning commission and to their city council, and it was approved last night. So now county action is needed. And so we'll go through our own process on that. As we talked about previously, the board can choose to adopt or reject the proposed urban growth boundary expansion. When we begin your hearings process, we will bring back to you information about what criteria the board can use in order to make those decisions. Community input is, of course, a part of all of our public hearings processes, and so we will expect to hear community input about this, and we'll be responsive to that as we typically are through our ordinance processes. We have already received some community feedback on this. The ordinance that we will file will contain updates to two different plans. The two different plans are the Rural Natural Resource Plan and the Comprehensive Plan for the Urban Area. And if the board chooses to adopt the ordinance, it will reflect in both of those plan documents that that land is now considered urban and within the urban growth boundary of the city of North Plains. So the next steps we've identified are for the Planning Commission to hold their first hearing on October 18th and the board to hold their first hearing on November 28th. The Planning Commission is having a work session on this at their night meeting tomorrow. So this will be their opportunity to hear this information, ask questions. If the board chooses to adopt the ordinances, then once the board has done that, it will go to the Department of Land Conservation and Development for acknowledgement.
One board hearing and decision that one night, or do we have to do a first reading earlier than a second reading board hearing adoption on the 28th?
I believe we can do it at one hearing. But it depends on the board. If there needs to be an engrossment to the ordinance, then we would have to follow the typical engrossment process, and that would result in 2 additional hearings.
Okay.
So it sort of depends on how that process is going to play out for us. There could be an appeal of this process. There could be an appeal of North Plains Council action. There could be an appeal of any county action. There could be an appeal of DLCD acknowledgement. And so our plan is that we'll wait until all appeals related to this action are resolved. And once that's done, county staff will bring forward 2 additional ordinances. The first ordinance will be very similar to what you typically see with metro urban growth boundary expansions, which is where we bring our plans into alignment with the fact that there has been an urban growth boundary expansion. And then the second will be an ordinance to update the urban planning area agreement that we have with the city of North Plains to reflect their new urban growth boundary area. So we have a few more actions within the next few years, again, depending on the outcome of the hearings that we'll have on this. And now we are back to our policy questions. So do you have any questions for North Plains staff or for county staff at this time?
Yeah, just a couple. So what's the timeline from this approval process in November? Then it goes on to DLCD, and then you got to start doing the really hard work of how you put infrastructure and develop that. So what's your anticipated timelines on this to actually get it a productive either residential or employment land? How long before that's going to come online?
Better idea. I mean, I guess that Commissioner Woolley, that's a great question. I think probably with appeal process potentially and other uncertainties, I would say we're looking at a good year before we're thinking any kind of annexations by anyone. I mean, we still have to do comprehensive planning, which then leads to us having to update capital improvement plans, which then leads to having to update system development, charge methodology, to follow up and fully account for how infrastructure is going to be funded based on where we find development likely to occur sooner rather than later. So I think the best answer I have right now is it's going to be 12 months before we can consider annexation of any kind, assuming, successful UGB process.
Well, just looking at, there's areas of it that obviously infrastructure is on the peripheral. So that shouldn't be too bad, but then you look more to the west, to your 295 acres. That certainly is, there's nothing there. I don't know if there's up and down Gordon Road there, but anyway, I just, all that's going to take time to really design and develop and pay for. So it's going to be a while out there before that stretches out.
Isn't that where the glider port is?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Commissioner Shrieks.
Yes, they mentioned, I think at a previous meeting, or maybe it was in a one-on-one, that lease is up.
Yeah.
Within 2 years.
I don't know what kind of infrastructure is there to support that glider port. So not much.
Small hangar.
Yeah, that's true.
Any other commissioners have questions?
I do. Thanks again. I think this is the third time I've seen either portion of this or all of it, so I appreciate, again, the consistency and message. What do we have to do to support whatever conclusion we come to? I mean, I've already said, and they know that too, I support this particular proposal. But there has to be some criteria that we use or some evidence that we have. Simply saying, nice job, you've made your case, because if there's an appeal process, they're going to want to see if we did our due diligence. So can you inform us about what that would look like? What boxes do we need to check to show that we've done something other than just say we like it?
Sure. So as a part of the board's consideration of the filed ordinance, we will have the opportunity to review the findings that are associated with this work. And that's the technical acknowledgement that the plan checks all the boxes as it needs to move forward. And so that will be the board's formal action to approve what North Plains has done and show your support for the UGB expansion.
That's just acknowledge.
Approve the ordinance.
Yeah, approve the ordinance. Okay, all right.
But if I could, because I have a similar question or need for information, and I split it in two ways. What criteria, factors, or what have you, do we need to base a Board of Commissioners decision on, particularly with regard to approval? And so Aaron mentioned to me earlier all the technical findings that will be part of the ordinance, but I similarly have the question of what criteria would we possibly have any basis for? I think the word was rejecting that you used earlier, because we can't just say, well, we don't like it, so I want to understand, because I've not had the opportunity to make one of these decisions previously outside of the metro urban growth boundary. So I want to know what the rules are either way.
It is really an interesting process. And like I said earlier, staff have had a lot of communication with our state partners at the Department of Land Conservation and Development to make sure that we understand the process that we're supposed to go to, because we haven't done this in a while. So there will be criteria, and staff will work on putting together either a memo or bringing it as a part of the staff report that you see in advance of your hearing, so that you understand the criteria to use in your decision-making process, whether you do determine that approving the ordinance is the right path forward or rejecting the ordinance is the right path forward, if you feel that those criteria have not been met. So we will bring the board back that information.
So Commissioner Rogers, are we on the same wave?
We're exactly the same.
Okay.
Yeah, because simply saying you've met the criteria and we find no reason to reject doesn't say that we've done due diligence. What do we do that? I guess other than you've reviewed it.
Right. It's pretty extensive. So we'll want to bring that in the staff report forward to the board about the various pieces of information that you can use to make
Did
that
you
determination.
inform them that we had people here today, earlier at our meeting, that were opposed and said that they were going to be filing some kind of action then. So you're all aware of all of that. Nothing new, I suspect. Okay.
Other commissioners, questions, comments?
I know that this is outside of Metro's boundaries. I understand all that. Has there been discussion with Metro just about how this impacts long-term decisions?
Commissioner Treese, yes, there has been. We've had two-way communication. We've reached out to them during this process, and more recently, in the last few months, they reached back out to us. Really, regarding transportation planning, looking at some of the interchanges that are, within the metro boundary or
Right.
very close to that. So yeah, we have been in communication with their planning staff.
Okay.
And the chair too.
I don't have any question for you guys, but I just wanted to say thank you for meeting with me for the one-on-one. This was a very enlightened process. So thank you for the educational discussion that we've had in your city.
Beyond the question that I had similar to Commissioner Rogers, I have two kind of detailed questions. So I see you've done a nice job of laying out in today's presentation 167.4 acres of residential, the 697.8 acres for employment for a total of 855.2 acres as part of this UGB request. How many acres is within the city's current UGB? You can take that as a to be answered for the next meeting,
Okay.
which is fine.
Yeah, we'll do
Not a
that.
problem. I'm not asking you to guess, do it off the hip. I'm curious to know. Then the other detailed question is really kicked off, leveraging off of Commissioner Treese's question with regard to Metro. So I will be interested to know as part of the package that we consider what the population growth is over that 20-year time period, because PSU comes up with their, what is it, the PSA, and then Metro claims loose word here, I'm not a lawyer, what portion of that they expect to capture within their 20-year UGB process. And so that leaves the quote unquote, the rest for the other portions outside of the Metro UGB within the county. So North Plains can't, as I understand it, in my very lay person language, North Plains can't just say, well, we want to grow by a gazillion. Metro has to say that that gazillion is not say in a formal sense, but that gazillion has to come out of some other number. So I just don't know what those numbers are. So I look forward to the packaging laying that out for me. That's all. Because at this juncture, related to that question, it seems like that 855 is a pretty big ask compared to the current footprint. And just having lived and traveled around the city for over 3 decades now that I realize it, it's like, whoo, wow, what kind of time period are they thinking about? Which I will learn more from your material. So that'll be great. Okay. Well, that's it. It wasn't too bad, but I think part of it is we've got work ahead, and that's what we've got to sort through. So thank you very much for being here today and representing this for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Keep up the good public service. All righty. So we're a little quick on time, but thank you to our Washington County team for being here with regard to the Center for Addiction Triage and Treatment.
Long time no see.
And take it away, team.
Good afternoon, Chair Harrington, Board of County Commissioners. My name is Mira Samantha. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Director of Health and Human Services. Very pleased to see you again this afternoon and to have with me Nico Cohn, who is our Division Manager for Behavioral Health, and Kristen Burke, our Project Manager for the Center for Addictions Treatment and Triage, or Triage and Treatment. So I'm really excited to turn it over to them to provide a financial and design update for you.
Good afternoon, Chair Harrington. Good afternoon, Board. As Mira mentioned, my name is Nico Cohn, and I'm here today with Kristen Burke to provide an update on the financial progress related to the Center for Addictions Triage and Treatment. And so for today's presentation, we're really going to focus on an update on our financial strategy, which is going to include both an addendum to our financial analysis that we presented to the Board previously in January of 2022, and then also an update on the capital construction budget as we've gotten some firmer numbers through the work with our architects and our contractor. We're going to finish up with a board request to come back on October 17th and to consider approving a resolution in order to adopt the financial plan that we'll be discussing today. We've met with you all quite a bit about this project, but we always like to start with just an overview of what we're trying to achieve. And so with the Center for Addictions Triage and Treatment, or CAT, what we're trying to do is develop a comprehensive substance use disorder treatment center in our community and to really develop some of the underdeveloped infrastructure related to substance use disorder treatment in particular. We started planning this project back in 2019, and it is wild to say that we've been doing this for 4 years now. We've involved over 230 community members and stakeholders in the design, and we always like to center ourselves on this is really a project that's been designed by our community, and a lot of community voices come into the development of it. Our goal is to add 86 additional inpatient beds to our community, really looking at increasing access in the areas that we need the access the most. And when we're talking about inpatient beds, we're talking about sobering, withdrawal management, and residential services that would all be located in one of the buildings we'll discuss in just a little bit. Our goal is to have most of these services operational by the end of 2025. And so we are well into the development of this project, but we still have a little bit longer to go. As we've mentioned previously, with CAD, we are going to be developing a split campus approach. And so we have purchased and acquired 2 buildings to house the services that will be offered at the Center for Addictions Triage and Treatment, one of which is the Intensive Services Building, which will house all of the 86 beds that that I discussed previously. This will be open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and all of the services there will be operated by Coda Inc., who is going to be their selected provider, and they've been actively involved with the development of every aspect of this clinical model and the building itself. We'll also have a second building, which is the Community Services Building, which will be located at Elam Young Parkway. We're really talking about the Community Services Building as an integrated service mall where there'll be a lot of co-located supports to support the needs of our community. So housed at this building will be our Behavioral Health Division. It'll be the permanent home for our Hawthorne Walk-In Center, and we'll also have a peer drop-in center, outpatient culturally specific services for the Latinx community, in addition to some supported housing services and some medical service as well. As you can see on this slide, we have provided a lot of updates to the board over the last couple of years in relation to the financial progress of this project. As I mentioned previously, we presented our financial analysis in January of 2022, and we came back earlier this year in March to provide a financial update when we got some pretty significantly updated figures that would impact the bottom line of what this project would be. Ongoing, we've been presenting quarterly financial updates to the board and to county leadership, and we've started publishing those in July of 22 and have been doing it every quarter since. And so we've been trying to be operating as transparently as possible to make sure that we're able to answer any questions that you all might have proactively as we're getting additional information about what the project's going to be looking like financially.
Could I ask a clarifying question? And I may have my timing off. But with regard to those prior financial analysis, I know that you did a lot of work for the acquisition of the 2 different sites. And then, and I can't remember if those were the main drivers for each of those prior financial steps, or if only one of them was, and there was a little bit more like early concept grounding. Could you help me anchor myself there?
The initial financial analysis had the drivers. It included costs for the two buildings, but it also included what the operational costs would be. And so
Right.
we presented with the best information and knowledge that we had at that time. And then we came back in March of this year with an update as we got firmer figures.
Got
And
it.
we'd already made decisions about where the buildings would be located.
Thank you.
So with that, the financial analysis, as Nick mentioned, it was created almost 2 years ago. And so as part of this briefing, we went back and took a look at the financial analysis and realized that a lot of figures needed to be updated. So I created an addendum that really had more current figures based on information we've gotten now that we have building design, we have the building secured, that sort of thing. But that said, the financial analysis itself is still actually very accurate in terms of how the services are going to be funded, how we plan to do the maintenance. You know, basically the strategy behind the financial analysis is still sound and what we've been following all along. We just updated the figures because now we have more information about the capital costs. So this is our well, I was going to say this is our most recent capital cost figures, but this has really been an exercise in a moving target. The numbers have changed. I've actually updated these slides 3 times, and these numbers still need to be updated. So, which is really a reflection of where we're at with the project right now. We're working really closely with our architects, with our CMGC, our construction manager, general contractor, and getting very firm numbers at this point. Our construction manager is going out and getting bids from actual subcontractors, and we're using that to inform the figures. So the numbers are changing, pretty consistently changing from week to week. But the good news is that they're heading in a better direction this time. You may recall a previous time when I've come before you and said, well, you know, it's actually significantly higher. We're really honing in. The amount that they're changing at this point is very minimal. So if you look at the current budget and the bottom line, that's the $61.3 million. We just met with our architects and our GC last week, and actually we're able to identify some cost savings that was really fortunate. We were really excited to find out that moving a window over about a foot saved us about $400,000. So those sorts of things, that's where the general contractor is really helping us in the building designs and finding ways that we can not only find cost savings, but then put back some of the features that we had kind of removed for cost savings previously. So we're really reaching a point where the numbers are getting pretty firm. Our current number right now, instead of $61.3 million, it's actually just under 61 million. So it's actually gone down by about $400,000. So that's really good news. One of the things I do want to call out is you might notice that the contingency number has gone down from the revised target in December of 2022 to the September 2023. And that was a real kind of deliberate approach that we took because the numbers are getting much firmer. We have real data behind these numbers and how we're approaching the project. We reduced the contingency from 15% of the estimated budget to 12%. And that was in, working with our facilities department to really determine kind of what the target would be. One thing I do want to say, though, is that contingency is separate from our contractor contingency. So our contractors also have a contingency built into their budget. This is a project contingency that we added on just so that we could manage any sort of ups and downs that might happen and, not have the project get put in jeopardy for having something unexpected coming. Our assets have also changed. These are pretty similar to what are in the financial analysis addendum, but there's a couple of things I want to call out here. First of all, we'll just get to the good news. It's actually higher and the deficit is erased at this moment. So that's really good news. One of the things that has happened in the last week is in talking with our financial analyst in the HHS department, we actually are earning a lot more interest than we had expected. And so given the funds that we're holding for the project, we're increasing the interest earnings amount to $1.7 million, which is still a relatively conservative estimate for that. So that was a nice added bonus. I do want to call out that while we have most of these dollars committed and held here at the county at this point, there are a couple of pots that are not actually physically here yet. So you'll notice the additional opioid settlement funds expected in 2023 and 24, and that should also say and 2025, because some of those are coming in a little delayed. But those are funds that we anticipate receiving, but we haven't received yet. Likewise, the legislative allocations, 5 million of that is from the Oregon, the last legislative session with Oregon. Those will be lottery bond dollars that will come in early 2025. The other amount is $2.5 million, which was the federal earmark. We understand that there's still a lot that has to happen for those dollars to actually get here. So while we're have them on here as project assets, we recognize that that's not a secured thing at this point, but we wanted to account for the fact that we've got our federal legislators behind us and advocating for this project. So our total amount at this point, in terms of project assets, if everything comes in as expected, is $61.6 million instead of the $60.8 million. So as you've heard, it's a moving target. Things are kind of going up and down. In terms of the design of the project, we're feeling really confident at this point. We've actually added back a few features that we were hoping to be able to afford that we weren't sure if we were going to be able to. And our general contractor is getting some really firm bids at this point from subcontractors. So we're not anticipating a whole lot of additional surprises at this point in terms of the budget, but we know it's still going to shift either up or down a little bit over the next few months as we work towards our guaranteed maximum pricing with our general contractor. We should have a guaranteed maximum price for the Elam Young building by March, and then by June for the other building. And then, as I said earlier, our financial plan remains the same for the other services, or for the other aspects of the project, which includes funding of clinical services and the maintenance of the building. I do have a little update for the clinical services. We did, you'll see on that third bullet, it says that all services are fully covered except sobering in the peer drop-in center. I'm happy to report that we've been working with our local CCO, Care Oregon, who is committed to funding the peer drop-in center. And so that program is actually going to be opening up for an RFP here shortly to select the provider so that they can help participate in some of the design and planning. But that is a funded program at this point. So
peer drop-in.
the peer drop-in center.
Explain the peer, I've forgotten what that is.
Yeah. So the peer drop-in center is basically a recovery program for people who have gone through treatment and are in recovery, but it's a program that's run by peers where they can provide support to other people who are in recovery. And so it truly is a peer-run program where people learn or develop social supports that are with others who are also in recovery. It's a great model.
Great, thank you.
And the other thing I want to mention is that our plan is to use the opioid settlement dollars to fund the unfunded services. So sobering is the primary unfunded service. And we believe we'll be able to get some CCO dollars for that, but that won't cover the full cost of the service. And it really needs to be a program much like crisis services, which is available to all community members regardless of insurance or coverage. And so our plan is to use the opioid settlement dollars to really help fund those services and ensure they're available for our community members. In terms of the overall building maintenance, again, our plan is the same here as it was previously. We will execute leases with the providers that are in the space, but with the goal of those leases covering the cost, but keeping the leases as low as possible. And I've been working on a strategy with Laurel and Greg from facilities on how to do this, to find the right balance of keeping the leases low, to encourage providers to use the space, but making sure that the building costs are covered.
So in addition to the update, we really wanted to come to the board today with a request. We will be coming back on the 17th of October and request that the board approve a resolution and order that really lays out as far as adopting the Center for Addictions Triage and Treatment financial analysis and funding strategy that directs all of the use of all of the opioid settlement funds toward this project, really with the goal of memorializing the direction of this board and the long-term financial strategy of the CAD. We hope to bring this to the community as a successful program that will outlast all of our careers potentially with the county, and really want to memorialize the direction and the support that you all have been providing to this project. And with that, that's the end.
Commissioners, questions and comments?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So how much of what is our opioid settlement total? We've got 4.1 million to date.
Yep.
You're planning on using that for operational overhead. So what do we got looking out there ahead of us?
Yeah, so at this point, we've received 4.1 million. We expect to receive another, I think, 4.6 million over the next about 2.5 years. All of those dollars we want to use towards capital, filling some of the capital gap. And then as soon as the program opens, we would shift to using the opioid settlement dollars for services at that point. And so we'll use the money we're receiving right now up until the point that the program opens for the capital expenses, and then shift it over to the service costs. And in total, yeah, in the total amount right now, we're estimating about $29 million over 18 years.
Wow.
And it is variable. There may be, I'm going to look to Brad because he knows this. There may be additional settlements that come in. And so the 29 million is based on what we know today.
So what's the criteria for use of that dollars?
It really well, and Brad, do you want to speak to this?
So the settlement, it depends on the settlement. So it depends on the settlement. They're all a little bit different, but they basically have a main structure that it has like 5 different buckets that the money can be spent in. And this was identified early on at Washington County to go to CAP, but there are other big buckets that the money can go into, like buying Narcan and, just a whole variety of items that will reduce the use of opiates in your community.
Primarily focused on addiction issues, though.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, that's interesting. So anyway, I'll wait for more of this information to become up, but yeah, it's really interesting when you look at what you initially estimated spending $41 million. We're at $61 million now. The costs of construction and all that's gone up, but also is that because kind of as you peel back a few layers of the onion, the building itself opened up some walls? Did you encounter some problems there that you didn't anticipate initially, or is all of this just cost of construction?
Yeah, it actually, we haven't had any surprises yet around the building, so that's good. It's really been once the first estimate, well, the very first estimate was based on very preliminary plans. And so there was just not enough information there to get a good estimate. The second estimate, which is a middle column, actually I can go back here.
One more, there you go.
Yep. You're right. So the second estimate, which was the 60.6 million, that's the one where we went from the 41 to this, and the big jump. This was done by DCW cost estimators. So our architects had taken the plan, sent it to a cost estimator who then went through, and they have formulas that they use, like this many linear feet to cost this for, foundation for this and that. The estimate that we have right now for the current budget is actually based on bids that our general contractor has gotten from companies out in the community. And so this is a more realistic based on what they're going to spend. So it's based on, companies going through and doing their own work and saying, this is how much we'll charge you to do and they went through and got lots of bids. I think they got over 40 different bids from different subcontractors in different areas.
Okay, I'll stop there and go ahead.
If I could
Mhm.
build off of this one, if I heard you right, you also talked about how you and the team are working towards the guaranteed maximum price for each building. Relative to this December 17th action, how far out in time do you expect to have reached the guaranteed maximum price definition?
I'm not quite sure how to answer that.
Can I ask it in a sensical manner?
Well, so let me say I am not a facilities person. And so when they're talking about guaranteed maximum pricing, I'm kind of saying yes.
That sounds really good. Now, what exactly are you telling me?
Yeah.
Chair, we'll hold that question and come back.
Okay.
Come back to that with input from our facilities team.
Yeah.
Is that like an expiration date on the?
It's just a definition.
It's another milestone.
Okay.
But I don't know if it's the last contractual development milestone in
Yes.
terms of
When we hit
dollars and cents.
when we hit the guaranteed maximum price, that is the amount we will contract with our general contractor, and that's the price of the building. So it will be done at that point.
Yeah.
In terms
But we will line that up
Yeah.
with the timing
Yeah.
for your board.
Yeah, I think it'll
Yeah.
be good if you're able to answer that,
Yep.
a la the October 17th date.
Well, and those are the dates that I was saying. So March 1st is the date that we would get it for the community services building.
Oh, got
And
it.
then June is when we will have that set for the intensive services building.
Got it. I see. And then you're still hoping to have the whole place constructed and open by the end of 25?
So the community services building the construction schedule has it being wrapped up by the end of February of 2025. So we would be moving in shortly and begin operating services out of that building spring of 2025. For the other building, they should be wrapped up with construction in August of 2025, with us beginning to occupy the building later that year. There's going to be more startup associated with that building because of training. And
Oh,
that
aren't
sort of
you
thing.
lucky that I'm tattooing on the inside of my brain? End of 2025, and they're gonna beat that.
That's the goal. That is definitely our
I'm
goal.
setting you up for success, knowing that it's a volatile market.
I think you knew how I was going to respond to that, Chair. We will provide updates with any changes in the timeline.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you for letting me leverage off of
Yeah,
your
no, I'm
question.
glad you asked that question because I was hoping somebody else did and I wasn't picking this space, but I'll do it anyway. We are really excited, as I know that you are, to get this online. It's not only the only one in Washington County, but it's the only one for a fairly large area. I think generally everybody's going to be excited to see this come online. So good job on this. You're staying to it. It's a big job, but we'll look forward to celebrating with the ribbon cutting in late 25.
Other commissioner questions or information needs?
Little picky one, just for my edification. Are we the 100% owner of these two facilities?
Yes.
Is there any clawback at all if the facilities are used any different way by either federal or state?
Yes. Yeah, both of the buildings will have a restricted covenant placed on them by the state of Oregon for the use of Measure 110 dollars and also for the use of some of the residential grant dollars that we had.
Which is about how much money?
The Measure 110 is 5.1 million, and then the residential dollars is 2.3 million.
So about $7 million clawback in the event that for some reason we were unable to maintain it at some quarter.
Yeah.
Okay. Are all of the
That's a 20-year window.
It is a 20-year window.
okay, about 20 years?
Yeah.
For all of the non-county units that might be in here that you're leasing to, are they all nonprofits?
Yes.
So there's no for-profit entities that you're,
Not at this time. We had been in conversation with a pharmacy, and ultimately the pharmacy wants to take a wait and see approach. They want to have the building up and operating and seeing how much client flow is going through the building before they consider opening services there. They would be for profit. Everything else is nonprofit. Every other.
reason for asking that is if you're gonna have non-profit entities in there or for-profit, you're gonna lose the property tax status and part of your building. You're gonna have potentially some unrelated business income, which you might have taxes on. Even though you're not a taxing entity, you still could have them.
I appreciate you bringing that up. We'll put that down as something that we consider as we're going forward. Again, it would just be the pharmacy, and because that's going to be a later phase, we'll have time to consider that and see if there's other options as well.
How about you're trying to keep rents low, which is always a nice thing to do. But unfortunately, there are things like roofs that go bad and HVAC system, you name it, parking lots have to be redone. What contingencies are you putting in to keep rents low and yet have adequate reserves in the future to deal with these?
I'm glad you asked that.
Your colleagues are hoping to answer that with.
That's called the CIP.
Yeah, that's right.
Well,
Sorry,
that would be
sorry, I
internally,
whispered so
but
loud.
I'm wondering, 'cause this is.
No, that is the plan. That process is the plan. More so than we've ever done before.
Yes. Okay.
That- Can I answer that?
Yeah,
That's
she's
part-
had an answer there, so.
That's, there's the capital component and then there's the ongoing maintenance of the building that needs to be addressed. So the HHS team and the facilities team has been working extremely collaboratively on what that rent should be in the construct of leases, to ensure that we're maintaining day-to-day operations of the building while planning for capital needs at the same time with those leases. Correct.
Appreciation. It is, but it's very different on the private side where you're recapturing all your costs. CIP to me in a government environment is where you're relying on tax dollars or something else. I mean, when you're renting to other entities, I'm just one, but I don't think it's particularly fair to say we're going to a CIP program to pay, the public pay for deferred maintenance costs because we're unwilling to charge what the going rent is. So that's just my comment.
And I'll be honest, I don't know what CIP is. But what I will say is that we're having conversations with the head of facilities about the Verizon lease, the tower that is on the site. That brings in about $50,000 a year in revenue. And we've been talking about possibly putting that money for major projects for the two buildings. So creating an account basically where we're setting aside money in anticipation of a roof needing to be replaced in 15 years or something like that.
All facilities planning comes under the responsibility of the facilities department. When the team comes back, I'd like to also have the facilities team be here to help present this and answer those questions, Roy, because I know that it has been covered in the calculations they've been comprehensively working on.
Mm-hmm. And I still stand behind the statement that we've done more with this project and with our current asset pool than has ever been previously done.
Yep.
Hats off.
Mhm.
Any other comments, commissioners?
I don't have a question, but just a quick comment. and it's a friendly comment. I just want to say good work. This is, I'm impressed of how you diversified the funding sources, you know, the revenue sources, as well as how you able to get some commitments early on, like the health share commitment for the peer drop-in. I'm sure that took a lot of conversations, and so kudos in building that trust and relationship with them to be able to give you that commitment. And then the county staff for lobbying to get that state dollars. I'm sure we would have liked more, but good work on that work at the state level. This is a lot of money, you know, 60 million. And I was sitting here reflecting back on a previous conversation that we've had around the SIP and updating those objectives, the program objectives, and kept coming back. One of the objectives around like investing within Washington County, you know, by Washington County, for Washington County. It wasn't, I'm paraphrasing, of course, that's not the correct wording they used, but I'm wondering if we could go in with the intentions and then later on demonstrate that success story of, you know, these vendors are within Washington County, like how much of this money actually went into Washington County, not as, you know, as opposed to bringing in different organizations from other jurisdictions. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I'm hoping we could demonstrate level of investments within Washington County, you know, whether that is, you know, our diversity vendors, and some of the other organizations that we bring in. So just, this is just my friendly comments to you. Kudos, the great work you all are doing. And I was sitting here when the Commissioner Rogers was asking you, I was looking at that slide that had the actual dollar amount, and you got it right. So it, you know, you're living and breathing this work. And I just want to, as a community member, appreciate you, the work you're doing, as well as the board members.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
To all of you.
It's a good job, team. And Kristen, it's come a long way since those early meetings in 2019. Keep going all the way through the launch finish line. Whenever it happens out in 2025, it's going to be tremendous. We are all somewhat anxious to get it available to the community, knowing the unmet need that exists. But you and your team members help our community each and every day with other services, related services, to help bridge that span of time. So keep going. Don't lose hope. Keep going. This is tremendous. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'm looking forward to the memorializing what we're doing too. So I think
October 17th.
That's a great idea.
Here we come.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, you'll be on vacation that day. I think.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Cancel.
We'll
Oh.
channel you.
Well, I'll be channeling you.
That's it for the work session agenda today, but I know Commissioner Treese has some board communication information.
Yes, I just wanted to let you know where we are, and this is both the chair and myself are working on the evaluation for Ms. Angie, and that process will go from now through the end of the year. And I wanted to remind you that this is going to be a quote abbreviated year. Last year we did a 360 that involved, you know, quite a few people. It was a long process. This year will be quite abbreviated. I've talked with Michelle Rios. She's provided me with a rough timeline, but I wanted to let you know what the process will be. And that is going to include Ms. Angie will be doing a self-evaluation that will be abbreviated. We are going to each of us receive 4, maybe 5 questions to think about, and you will be interviewed by Michelle Rios sometime between September 25th to allow for vacations and November 3rd. So that process will happen during that time frame. And I'll be working with Megan, and I'm not sure who else, to schedule those interviews. And then based on what the interview results are, Ms. Rios will be putting together a report, if you will. We'll be talking about that in session here, and then we'll be working through compensation issues after that's done. So I just wanted to give you an update. And the difference this year is that it's going to actually be 6 interviews. There'll be the 5 commissioners, and Mr. Anderson will be included in this. And the purpose behind including Mr. Anderson is that he's our other direct report. He's new to this process, and it's good they're working together on so many things. It's good to start and enhance many conversations that are already going on, as well as give Brad insight into how we do this type of work. So that's where we are, but I wanted to give you a heads up now so that you'll see this coming down the pike. But I do really want to emphasize that this is a much abbreviated process than last year. Next year, we'll talk after the end of this year. We'll look and see if we want to go to a more full-blown, if you will, process in the future. Do you have any questions? Okay.
Thank you for that.
And by the way, the chair and I talked about this earlier, and we agreed that this was the direction to go.
Awesome. Terrific. Anything else for the good of the order today? All righty. See you next Tuesday. We're adjourned.